Many years did this study observe were added on to the lives of the participants playing tennis as their primary sport?
Tennis is an all-body sport, so it uses your legs, it uses your core muscles, back muscles, it uses your arm muscles, shoulder muscles. If you do anything in a social environment, you are always going to be healthier than someone who does not.
In that study, they noted that there was like an average of maybe 15 years in sports like rugby and football, whereas tennis was like people stayed for like 25 years plus. Welcome back to the Getting Grip podcast. We've managed to fight through some technical issues to be here today. And we're going to talk about tennis for longevity. Those tech issues have definitely taken a few years off our life, but tennis could add a few years to your life, possibly. So I'm going to just give a little bit of background first to introduce the subject. So recently, there was a study that concluded. This study took 25 years to complete. So something that you might call like a cross-sectional study. So starting people, like observing them over time till it finishes 25 years later. And it was 8,500 people, so there was a decent amount of people here. And they looked at people playing various sports, including tennis, luckily, football, cycling, badminton, etc. And they looked at how many years might be added on to your life based on the primary sport that you played. You know, obviously there's always loads of different variables involved in these things, but I think it's just interesting to have this as a point of discussion. So what I want to know is how many years did this study observe were added on to the lives of the participants playing tennis as their primary sport, do you think, on average?
That's a good question. I mean, realistically, it can't be many years, right? Ooh. So I'm going to say, but it's worthy of, it's noteworthy. So that's why we're talking about it. I'm going to say 7. I like 7. Lucky number 7.
You know what? That's not a bad guess because the answer is 9.7 years. There you go.
Oh, so there was 10. A 7 in there. There's a 7 in there.
0.7 of a year. We'll take that. So that actually was one of the highest of any of the sports played. Badminton, they concluded that added 6.2 years on average to people's life expectancy. Football added 4.7 years on average. Cycling 3.7. And the other one that came in close to tennis was ballroom dancing, would you believe? That was also one of the other highest longevity sports. So why do you give me a reason why you think tennis might be able to add years onto people's life expectancy? What about the sport, anything about it that might help people to live a little bit longer?
Well, 2 things came to mind there. One, partially because you mentioned ballroom dancing, and the second one, a very logical answer. So what would you like first? Would you like the slightly weird answer that may have some validity, or the one that's just bog standard?
The weird answer.
The weird answer, okay. So you mentioned ballroom dancing, right? So I'm thinking that it's something to do with rhythm. Now, in tennis, rhythm is very, very important, especially during a point, because if you don't have rhythm, your feet aren't going to work properly. You're not going to put the steps down at the right times. Therefore, you might get too close to the ball, not close enough. You're not going to time things very well. And that is very, very important to, well, not just winning, but also playing well throughout a point and throughout a match. And this is what, you sometimes get commentators often talking about it, like, oh, he's lost his rhythm. And this can happen even to pros, for example, where they're just out of that zone for a while, where they're not quite... it's almost like being in a trance, I find sometimes, actually, because you're very aware of everything that's going on around you, and everything is very simple. There's no complex thoughts in your head, which for me is a very, very rare thing to find, because there's always something flying around in my head. But anyway, that's my weird answer.
Okay, interesting. And what's your logical answer?
Logical answer. Well, tennis is an all-body sport, so it uses your legs, it uses your core muscles, back muscles, it uses your arm muscles, shoulder muscles, and it uses your brain, because it's a very, very tactical sport as well, and technical as well, because you obviously have to think a lot about what you're doing as you learn to play better, or as you're playing as well. So there's that. So I think that's probably a key one, because it will promote physical health given all of that. Maybe not knee joints and maybe elbow joints, but people living longer but having less mobility in their older age. I mean, if you're playing tennis, you're probably not pushing yourself too hard. Pro tennis player, though, or if you're up towards that level, then yes, okay, you're grinding your knees down. So, it may be dependent on how you play. Oh, I've had another idea, actually. Oh, I've got a much better answer. I have a much better answer. Do you want a better answer?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting you said whole body, because that was the first thing I put down on my list as well. I thought, oh yeah, that's probably one of the main reasons. When you said, just briefly, about impact on joints and stuff, that's something you can also mitigate a little bit. We've talked about this previously, by the surface that you play on. So over here, first club that I worked at, they were playing on kind of Astro, more of like a slidey surface, right? So there's less impact on your joints than, say, on a hard court where you got to stop and then you got to move back into the court again. So there's a little bit less force or pressure going through your joints there. So that's some way you can mitigate that. Anyway, continue.
No, sorry, this is like my slightly ADHD brain sort of going through thoughts at about 1 million miles an hour. I know the reason it's probably the best one, or at least the main reason. It's a very, very social sport. And I can link this to a lot of research that I know is done, not only at my university, but also in collaboration with us. If you do anything in a social environment, you are always going to be healthier than someone who does not, because humans are inevitably animals who require social attention and mixing, for example. It's really important. We saw this in the COVID-19 pandemic. Tennis is great because most people, when they play, they're playing singles against a good friend of theirs, or they're playing doubles with a group of people, and they're having a little bit of a good fun time around that. Especially because when you're playing, right, you're talking. You play a point, and then you go, "Oh, that was great fun, wasn't it? Yeah. Hey, got you with that.
Thanks for hitting it at me, mate.
Down the line winner, yeah. Or just like, oh, sorry, didn't mean to hit you in the face. No, it's quite all right. Ha ha ha. So all of this paints a really idyllic image of how tennis is played. But because it's such a social sport, it does have that positive health benefit. A study that was done, and this is my favorite one to quote about social impacts, is they compared people who smoked in the workplace. So, go out as a group, stand outside, smoke away. They compared the people that did that and the people that quit. And after the time period, it turned out that the people who were smoking were healthier than the people at work who were not smoking. And you're thinking, what? Smoking's bad for you. Surely that'll make you lose health, for example. Well, actually, the social benefit of these people going out at break times, having a smoke with people, having a chat, having a laugh, that has a way greater impact on their health than the negative impact of the smoking. So it's a key thing to think. Like, you're not going to tell people, oh, you should go out and smoke. But having that social aspect, especially in a work environment, it very much improves longevity. And this is very much the case as well with tennis, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to dig into there. Like, people will be thinking, okay, yeah, that's great. There are other sports that, you also socialize in, but there's a few things here. One is the fact that you only need like one person to be able to play against, right? So that helps for consistency and being able to do it for a long time. Because, like when you're playing team sports, you got to get, I don't know, let's say 5-side football. You got 4 other people have got to be available for you to even have a team, right? And that's not even thinking about the other team. And people get busier and busier, as their lives go on. So that's one thing that helps with that. And 2, like you said, there's all these little small interactions, right? Which you might not get when you play a team sport. For example, like football, you've got 2 halves, and it's 45 minutes of you just like focused in game mode, and then you might chat for like 5-10 minutes, and then another 45 minutes, and then you might chat a little bit afterwards. Whereas tennis, play one game, sit down, might chat for a few minutes, play another couple games, sit down, might have another chat for another few minutes. So there's these little things that kind of help with that in terms of keeping those relationships going, like you said, which is like one of the key pillars of being able to live for a long time. So I think that those are a couple really important things to note. I also noted down head injuries, right? So a lot of other sports involve balls as well, involve heading balls, right? In tennis, luckily, you don't have to head a ball unless you're just messing around or whatever. Whereas again, like in sports like football, heading has been linked to, increased risk of dementia, not even in necessarily ball to head contact, rugby, for example, body to head contact. Huge studies that have been done on that. So again, I think that's another thing that helps with the longevity aspect. And also because it's just non-contact anyway, just generally your body's not getting beaten up. Like a lot of people end up having to leave the sport because of these injuries. So I think in that study, they noted that there was like an average of maybe 15 years in sports like rugby and football, whereas tennis, it was like people stayed for like 25 years plus. So I think that's another point to note. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
I think you make a good point. I like that for you, a measure of longevity is not being hit in the head. Because for a lot of people, they're not necessarily going to be thinking about being hit in the head as something they need to particularly avoid because, it's obvious. I think it is a very good point. This is probably why, that's probably a key reason why it's better than most of the other sports in terms of offering longevity, because any physical exercise is good, really. There is some research out there, quite a lot of research actually, that for various parts of your body, if you do too much exercise, it is just as bad for your health as if you did zero exercise, potentially worse. So you do have to find. It's just like comes down to that age-old adage that everyone always tries to use. Anytime you're like, "Oh, I'm having too much cake at the moment," or something like that. You just got to do it in moderation. It's always the way. You've got to do it in moderation. So this is where, if you're looking at elite athletes within your sport, you're probably not looking at the right people to see the longevity benefits. But most of us out there, we do things in moderation, and largely because we don't have time to do them obsessively. If I had more time, I probably would be on a tennis court more. And that's exactly the point. Because you don't have time, you manage it better, which is quite a good thing. Yeah,
I think one other thing also was, I think you mentioned the fact that it's using your whole body and then the coordination. That there's also the aspect of when you get a little bit better, the strategy that's also involved. And I think I'd be interested to know like if there was a study done that can compare like, I don't know, solving a puzzle versus playing like a tennis match and what effects that has on like risk of dementia and stuff. Because I know there's been studies done looking at like keeping your mind active as you get older, right? Through example, like solving puzzles and things, challenging your brain and those neural pathways to stay active. And I think the strategy aspect of tennis is a major help with that, because as you get better, there's always levels to go up and you're always challenged. So I think again that's another aspect that can help, just from the mental aspect.
I think when we talk about longevity as well, we're also talking about not just how long you live. I think it's very important to add that longevity is also about how well you live for a longer period of time. So, for example, a lot of us want to make sure that when we enter old age, we still have mobility and we still have, basically the ability to do the things we enjoy. And tennis for me is something that I enjoy. So I know for a fact I'm going to want to be playing it when I'm older. Yeah, sometimes. Yes, well, we won't talk about the bad times. But that's kind of the point, right? So it improves longevity. And it is also one of those things that you want to use your longevity to enjoy. So it's quite nice that it has this full cycle event in which it improves the very things that you want to have so that you can continue to enjoy these things. So, there is a lot of benefit to be had. And, even if you're listening to us and you don't like tennis, which I'd be very surprised about given we're a tennis podcast. But if that is the case, you have to find any other type of exercise like that, and it will still have that same benefit, because a lot of people have shown, the evidence is out there that being inactive is often quite detrimental to your health, relative to just even very light exercise, like going for a walk and stuff like that. So, I think I can see exactly why tennis has this massive benefit on the physical side and also the social side.
Yeah, even like 30 minutes a day, just like walking is what's better than nothing, obviously. But yeah, to wrap it up, basically, a few key points that in the favor of tennis are, the full body movement, obviously the social aspect. You only need like one other person, and you can, deepen relationships through that. No like head contact, also it's non-contact anyway, so just generally like you're more likely to stay in the sport for longer if you don't get injuries. Shock. And those are pretty much the main points. And obviously like the strategy aspect of it, keeping you mentally engaged, those sort of things. Also, there was a recent documentary on Netflix, people probably heard about this, the Blue Zone documentary, Living to 100. And that's what gave me the kind of idea for this. And tennis was in there in that last episode. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, that's also worth having a look at. Because obviously, it's not just about the sport that you play, but there's all these other aspects as well that go into living well for longer. So I'd highly recommend checking that out as well. But yeah, obviously, we hope you stay in tennis for a long time. I hope I'm playing tennis for, into my 70s, 80s. I see people out at tennis clubs here playing at 70s, 80s. I'm like, Jesus, like that's a goal to aim for. I'd be very happy if I can be at that point in my life and still playing tennis. But yeah, let us know your thoughts, anything we've kind of missed, which might be another benefit of tennis. And if you've enjoyed it, give us a like, share it around, and subscribe on YouTube. And we'll see you in the next one.